The rule I broke as a boss, and the price I paid. The lights died. 1 second, my office glowed with the warm amber of the desk lamp. The next, darkness swallowed everything. My hand instinctively moved toward the drawer where I kept my gun, but I stopped. Outside the window, red and blue lights painted the walls. Sirens wailed like wounded animals in the distance. Then I saw it, a white envelope sitting perfectly centered on my mahogany desk. I hadn't heard anyone come in. The door was still locked from the inside. My pulse hammered against my throat as I tore it open. The note inside had just one line, written in elegant script: the rule I broke as a boss and the price I paid. My blood turned to ice. Someone inside my organization knew. Someone had betrayed me. The shadows outside my window shifted, and I realized with crushing certainty that I was already surrounded. My mind flashed back to the one decision that broke my golden rule: never trust charm over instinct. I had let him in, Marco Vitelli, and now I was paying for it. Who sent this note? 6 weeks earlier, everything seemed perfect. My empire ran like clockwork. The Moretti family controlled the docks, the gambling halls, and every shipment that mattered in the city. Then Marco Vitelli walked into my club on a Tuesday night. He wore an expensive gray suit that fit him like it was painted on. His smile could melt steel, and his handshake was firm but not aggressive. "Mr. Moretti," he said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey, "I have a business proposal that will double your profits in 3 months." I should have said no. My gut told me to. But my crew was watching, and Marco had connections with suppliers in Europe that we needed. He laid out plans for new shipping routes, detailed profit margins, and spoke with confidence that made even my toughest lieutenants nod in approval. By the end of the night, I had hired him. As he left, I glanced at the ledger he'd left behind. In the corner of one page, almost hidden, was a small symbol: a snake eating its own tail. Something about it made my skin crawl, but I pushed the feeling aside. What did that symbol mean? 3 weeks into Marco's tenure, our most valuable shipment vanished. $5 million worth of merchandise, gone like smoke. I called an emergency meeting in the back room of my restaurant. The air smelled of garlic and old cigars. "Someone stole from us," I said, slamming my fist on the table. "Right under our noses." My lieutenants looked uncomfortable. Paulie, my oldest friend, spoke up. "Boss, Marco was overseeing that shipment. He's been working around the clock. Maybe it was the guys at the warehouse. They've been sloppy lately." "Marco," I felt heat rising in my chest. "Where is he now?" "At the charity event downtown." Vinny, another lieutenant, answered. "He's donating to the children's hospital. In our name. Making us look good." Everyone nodded approvingly. I bit back my anger. Later that night, I went to the warehouse alone. The empty crate sat in the corner. I ran my fingers along its side and felt something carved into the wood. The same symbol from Marco's ledger. The snake eating its tail. My blood ran cold. This was no accident. The next morning, old Sal visited me. Sal had been my father's consigliere, his most trusted advisor. Now he was retired, living in a small house by the beach. He rarely came into the city anymore. But there he was, standing in my office doorway, looking older than I remembered. "Tony," he said, using my first name like he did when I was a kid. "We need to talk about Marco Vitelli." I gestured to the leather chair across from my desk. "You've heard of him?" "I've heard too much." Sal's weathered hands trembled slightly as he sat. "That man is poison. I've been asking around. People are scared to talk, but when they do, they mention disappearances, money problems, families torn apart, and it follows him like a shadow." I wanted to believe him, but when I brought it up to my crew that afternoon, they laughed. Paulie actually laughed in my face. "Boss, with all respect, Sal's old. He sees ghosts everywhere. Marco's the best thing that's happened to us in years. The community loves him. He's making us legitimate." As they filed out, Sal grabbed my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. He leaned close, his breath smelling of peppermint. "Tony, listen to me. He's not what he seems. Trust your instincts, not your profits." His words echoed in my head all night. 2 days later, I got the call. One of my most loyal associates, a kid named Enzo who'd been with me since he was 17, was found in an alley. Someone had beaten him within an inch of his life. His face was unrecognizable, a mess of purple and black. At the hospital, Enzo could barely speak. His jaw was wired shut, but he managed to write something on a notepad. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. Masked men asked about you, about loyalty. My hands clenched into fists. Did you recognize anything about them? Enzo shook his head, then stopped. He wrote again. One had a tattoo. Snake. Circle. My vision went red. The snake symbol again. Marco's calling card. I stormed out of the hospital, my mind racing. When I got back to my office, I found something taped to my door. A playing card. The Joker. And written on the back in the same elegant script from the future note. Betrayal wears many faces. Someone was playing with me, and they wanted me to know. Marco threw a charity event at the Grand Ballroom downtown. He'd convinced me it was good for business, good for our image. The entire crew attended, dressed in tuxedos, smiling for cameras. Politicians shook our hands. Local reporters called us community leaders. I watched Marco work the room like a maestro conducting an orchestra. He remembered everyone's names, their kids' names, their problems. He made jokes that had people doubled over laughing. He donated a check so large that the hospital director cried. But I saw the cracks. The way his smile never quite reached his eyes. The way he touched people's shoulders just a little too long, like he was marking territory. And then I saw them. 3 men in dark suits, standing by the bar, not talking to anyone, just watching. I recognized one of them. Dominic Russo, enforcer for the Calabrese family. Our rivals. They weren't just watching the event. They were watching Marco. And when Marco glanced their way, he gave the smallest nod. So quick I almost missed it. My stomach twisted. I tried to catch Paulie's attention, but he was too busy laughing at one of Marco's stories. I was surrounded by blind men. The letter arrived in my personal mail, addressed to my home, not the office. Nobody knew my home address except my inner circle. I opened it in my study, the fireplace crackling softly. The letter was typed anonymous. Marco Vitelli is not who he claims. He has meetings with city officials behind your back. He promises them things that aren't his to give. Check the courthouse records. Look for permits filed under shell companies. The snake is coiling around your throat. I drove to the courthouse the next day. The clerk was a woman named Rita who owed me a favor. She pulled the records. My hands shook as I read through them. 3 new business permits, all filed in the last month. All under different company names. All listing Marco Vitelli as a consultant. I called him that night. We need to talk. About your side projects. Marco's voice was calm, unbothered. Tony, those are just investments. Personal ventures. Nothing that interferes with our work. Then why didn't you tell me? I didn't think I needed permission to invest my own money. His tone had an edge now. Is there a problem? I wanted to confront him, to throw the evidence in his face. But something told me to wait. No problem. Just checking. After I hung up, I noticed something on my desk. A folder I hadn't left there. Inside was a photocopy of a warehouse lease. The same warehouse where our shipment disappeared. And in the corner, stamped in red ink, was that cursed symbol. The snake. Frankie Moreno disappeared on a Wednesday. He was supposed to meet me for lunch, but he never showed. His phone went straight to voicemail. His apartment was empty, but not ransacked. It looked like he'd left willingly, except Frankie would never leave without telling me. The crew gathered in my office. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Vinny paced back and forth. Paulie sat with his head in his hands. Marco stood by the window, looking out at the city, his expression unreadable. We need to find him, I said. Spread out. Check his usual spots. Talk to his girlfriend. Someone knows something. Marco turned, his face the picture of concern. I'll handle the ports. He was doing some work for me down there. Maybe he ran into trouble. After everyone left, I searched Frankie's office. In his desk drawer, I found his wallet, his keys, his phone, everything he would have needed if he'd actually left. But tucked under his keyboard was a torn piece of paper. Just 3 words written in Frankie's handwriting. Marco knows everything. My hands trembled. Frankie had been trying to warn me. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I called a meeting with the entire crew right in the middle of our main restaurant during dinner service. I wanted witnesses. I wanted this public. Marco arrived last, as always, perfectly composed in his tailored suit. I didn't waste time. We have a traitor among us. Someone who's been stealing from us, hurting our people, and making deals with our enemies." The room went silent. You could hear the kitchen staff clattering dishes in the back. Marco tilted his head, his expression curious. "Who, Tony?" "You." I pointed at him. "The missing shipment. The attacks. Frankie's disappearance. It all leads back to you." I expected fear. I expected anger. Instead, Marco laughed. A genuine, warm laugh that made several of my men smile nervously. "Tony, I understand you're under stress. Frankie's disappearance has us all worried. But accusing me? I've done nothing but help this family. Ask anyone here." And they did. One by one, my men stood up for Marco. They talked about the money he'd brought in, the connections he'd made, the respect he'd earned. Even Paulie, my oldest friend, shook his head. "Boss, I think you need some rest. Maybe take a few days off." I stood there, humiliated, as my own crew turned against me. Marco met my eyes across the room. For just a second, his mask slipped. I saw the predator underneath. Then he smiled again and walked out. As he passed my chair, he paused. "Tony, I hope you feel better soon. The family needs you." Later, I saw him leaving with one of my private files under his arm. Nobody else noticed. I broke into Marco's apartment at 3 in the morning. It was risky, possibly stupid, but I was out of options. The place was immaculate, barely lived in. Like a hotel room. But in his home office, hidden behind a false panel in his desk, I found it. A ledger. Not like the ones we kept for the business. This was personal. Names, dates, amounts. And next to each entry, that snake symbol. I photographed every page with my phone, my hands shaking so badly I had to retake several shots. The ledger told a story that made my blood freeze. Marco had been systematically bribing my crew members, offering them money, power, protection. He had dirt on all of them. Gambling debts, affairs, past crimes. And he was leveraging it. But it was the last page that crushed me. A list of names. Calabrese family members, city officials, police captains, all marked with check marks, all on Marco's payroll. And at the bottom, circled in red ink, Phase 3, complete takeover. I photographed it all and left the way I came. Back in my car, I sat in the darkness, staring at the pictures on my phone. Marco wasn't just betraying me. He was planning to take everything. My empire, my legacy, my life. The question was, who could I trust? Paranoia became my constant companion. I couldn't sleep. Every footstep in the hallway made me reach for my gun. Every phone call could be a setup. I started investigating my own crew, digging into their finances, their movements. Vinny had received a large cash deposit last month. Paulie had paid off his house. Even my driver, Carlo, had bought a new car. All of them had been bought. The empire my father built, that I'd protected with everything I had, was rotting from within. I isolated myself, working late into the night in my office, jumping at shadows. Then the call came. A voice I didn't recognize, muffled, speaking quickly. "If you want the truth, check the docs. Pier 47. Midnight. Come alone." It was obviously a trap, but it was also my only lead. I spent the rest of the day preparing, checking my gun, planning escape routes, writing a letter to my sister, just in case. As I left the office that evening, I saw Marco in the hallway. He smiled at me. "Working late again, Tony? You should get some rest. You look tired." "I'll rest when I'm done," I replied. Done with what? I didn't answer, but as I walked past him, I heard him whisper so softly I almost missed it. "See you soon." The docks at midnight were exactly as terrifying as I'd expected. Fog rolled off the water, thick and cold. The only sound were the creaking of ships and the distant cry of seagulls. I kept my hand on my gun, eyes scanning every shadow. Pier 47 was at the far end, isolated. A single warehouse loomed in the darkness. The door was slightly open. I approached slowly, every instinct screaming at me to run. Inside, crates were stacked to the ceiling. And in the center, illuminated by a single bare bulb, was a table covered in papers. I moved closer. Shipping manifests, weapon orders, blueprints of my properties. Everything I needed to prove Marco's plan. He was smuggling weapons into the city, planning to arm his own crew and stage a coup. This wasn't just betrayal. It was war. Behind me, a floorboard creaked. I spun around, gun drawn. A figure stood in the doorway, hands raised. Don't shoot. I'm the one who called you. It was Frankie. Alive. Beaten and bruised, but alive. Frankie? What? No time, he gasped. Marco knows you're here. The gunshot was deafening. Frankie's eyes went wide. He collapsed, blood spreading across his chest. I dove behind a crate as more shots rang out. Footsteps pounded on the wooden floor. Multiple shooters. I returned fire, my shots wild in the darkness. Then I ran, crashing through a side door, into the fog, as the warehouse exploded into chaos behind me. I barely made it back to my car. My hands were covered in Frankie's blood. He tried to save me, and he died for it. I drove aimlessly for an hour, making sure I wasn't followed before heading to my safe house across the river. But paranoia drove me back to the office the next morning. I needed to know who else had turned. I called in Bobby DeMarco, one of my oldest lieutenants. We'd grown up together. If anyone was still loyal, it would be Bobby.